latitude, prevailing winds and ocean currents, mountains and the nearness to the sea. Things like that determine what we call the climate, determine what the climate of a place will be.
Welcome to Cambridge Zero Climate Talks with Antoinette Nestor
and Amy Munro-Ford.
Well, Amy, I'm so excited today because it is World Environment Day. And to celebrate it, we have a show full of interviews and chats and very interesting conversations. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's been a really busy week. It's sort of felt like all of the students, although they've got lots of exams and stuff, are really keen to get going on projects. And I feel like I've been in lots of meetings talking to them about things that they're doing, which has been really exciting and great, especially given the fact there's so much tension in the world at the moment. So to be able to focus on something that's really positive has been brilliant.
Indeed, yes, I agree. I've not tried to downplay anything. You just have to remain positive.
Yeah.
I had, as I said, I had a very busy week talking to lots of people. So I spoke to Baddeley from Chapter Zero and Munish Datta. Well, he has different roles, so you can hear a bit more about him. And he works with CISL and also with the UK Green Building Council. And I spoke to two children as well, Jasper and Ryan, and they're telling us about their view of the world and a few tips of what we can do on World Environment Day.
Brilliant. That sounds great. And this week I went to talk to the students who won this year's Carbon Challenge about their FoodIE app that they're developing. Yeah, I can't wait for you to hear more about that.
Oh, fantastic. And I also spoke to Claire and Naomi, and they're running the project of the Curious People. And yes, it's quite fascinating of what they're trying to do.
So who are we going to have first?
I spoke to Baddeley, and she serves on a number of company boards, and she's also the chair of Chapter Zero, which is a network to engage non-executive directors in the climate change challenges for their businesses. We started our chat by asking her how did it all start.
Well, I have to say, at my age, it started quite a long while ago, really. I've been in business for 40 years, having done a biology degree. So I did have a root in this topic, but I'm not an expert on climate change or science related to it at all. I'm a business person. I've been on boards for 20 years. And I realized a couple of years ago that the boards of our big businesses are vital to achieving the change that we need to get to net zero or to keep global temperatures to a acceptable level. I also have a strong Cambridge connection. I spent over 20 years in Cambridge. I had my own consultancy in Cambridge, quite near the station. So I've had a long connection with Cambridge. And now I'm even more closely connected with Cambridge through Hughes Hall College and the Centre for Climate Change Engagement that we've established at Hughes, which has links into all sorts of other parts of the Cambridge ecosystem that's working on this topic.
And is that part of Chapter Zero, or is that Chapter Zero different from what you're running at Hughes Hall?
Chapter Zero was initially an initiative that was set up by myself with some colleagues who are board members under the auspices of the World Economic Forum. We had the idea, but because the Hughes Hall Centre was engaged in this challenge, we brought the two things together. So Hughes Hall has been fundamental in the establishment of Chapter Zero. It's provided the secretariat for it since it first was launched, which was last summer. So effectively, Chapter Zero is a sort of baby of Hughes Hall and the World Economic Forum, which has been brought into the world by a group of business people like myself.
So what is your role as a chair of Chapter Zero? Do you try to connect different board members? Do you try to get more businesses engaged?
Well, Chapter Zero is a network, and it's intended to inform and engage chairs and non-execs, initially of UK listed companies. So we've been going under a year, and we have 800 members who are board members, and 44 of the FTSE 100 companies have a member in our group. And what we do is to run events, provide resources, develop toolkits, give information out to that community. And the reason we chose this community was because the non-executive directors fill the majority of board seats. And we felt that there wasn't really a place for them to learn about this topic. And it's such a fundamental topic for business. The questions, once you start to debate it properly in the boardroom, the questions are so deep-rooted in the whole way you run your business that we felt that unless the non-executives and chairs were engaged, it was going to be very difficult to get change to happen quickly enough.
And now with the current pandemic, how do you see companies emerging out of all this situation?
It's a very difficult time for everybody, as you will know and your listeners will know. And it's presented some massive challenges for companies in every sector. It's interesting in terms of how that compares with the challenge of climate change, because one of the things that we've talked about a lot in Chapter 0 and at Hughes Hall is that the challenge for business is as much about the regulation that might come in to tackle climate change as it is about the physical response of the planet to the climate. So, you know, physically there's going to be more flooding, more extreme weather, you know, loss of coral reefs, all the things we know about, more droughts. But there's also the recognition that probably we are going to overshoot our carbon budget and that governments around the world are going to have to act, and to get to net zero by 2050 is a big challenge. So the COVID experience is interesting in that the impact on companies has been about the regulation that's come in, that's affected the economy in a way no one could possibly really have understood, I think, in advance. Although that said, pandemic was on the risk register for a long while, but the way the response has been to close virtually everything down is huge. And so I think the jury is out on where this will take us. When I'm feeling optimistic, I feel that this has been a big wake-up call. We've shown how emissions can be reduced by changes in behavior. Okay, extreme changes that one doesn't expect to continue in this way, but emissions have fallen dramatically during this lockdown, with the consequent benefits of much better air quality and all those sort of things. We've seen how companies can respond incredibly quickly to these big challenges, like the way the supermarkets have kept our shelves stacked. And so on the one hand, we've had almost like a trial run in a way for some of the change that might come about through climate action. And we now have the opportunity to have financial stimulus packages coming from government, paying back effectively the money that all us as taxpayers have put into this furlough scheme and all the other support we've given. We've got an opportunity to make those financial packages very green, very climate friendly, really to move things forward. On the other hand, when I'm not feeling so optimistic, I see this having been knocked off climate having been knocked off the agenda by COVID. I see people trying to go back to what they think of as business as usual and thinking that's going to be the direction of travel. And, you know, the question over what bailing out we might or might do with what possible handcuffs. So as I say, I think it's really challenging to know which way this is going to go. And the big message that we're coming through in Chapter 0 is build back better. You know, we are where we are now. We've seen what this has done to us. Let's build a more resilient economy, an economy that's fairer, and an economy that gives us a chance of keeping to the 1.5 degree temperature rise.
So is that one of the reasons why you sent a letter to the Financial Times encouraging Build Back Better?
Absolutely. I mean, we felt that it was really important that this stays on the agenda, even though people are very occupied by the immediate challenges of social distancing in offices, or, restaurants being closed, and, shops now reopening. These are big challenges for business, but we cannot afford to let the climate agenda slip back, because we've got a limited time to tackle it. And if we lost a year or 2 years or 3 years, we would run out of time. And we've also now got the challenge of which will be presented at COP26. It obviously was delayed from November this year. We suspect it will be late next year. But there is an opportunity to use that as a real rallying call for UK business to show what we can do. Some of our companies are world leaders on action on this topic. And that's an opportunity to show how we can really move the world forward.
And Julie, which other organizations are you involved with here in Cambridge?
Cambridge has been hugely supportive, both of our centre at Hughes Hall and of the Chapter Zero initiative, and obviously has some of the best research and thinking on this topic, but spread quite widely through the university. So we're working with CISL, we work with the Judge Business School, we're working with the Cambridge Centre for Science and Policy, the Risk Centre for Existential Risk. So we're quite closely woven into the Cambridge ecosystem and trying to draw on all that wonderful thinking and bring it into the boardroom.
And talking about moving the world forward, given today's World Environment Day, what is your vision for the future, or what type of world would you like to live in?
I think I might draw from some of the words that David Attenborough used when he was interviewed on the BBC quite recently, when he said, what we need is a world where we don't waste the precious resources the earth has to offer. We don't waste water, we don't waste energy, we don't waste food. And we invest in a future where my grandchildren's generation can flourish, protecting the precious natural world that we live in. I think the way he phrased it is that the earth is not just a fruit basket we can take as many apples out of as we like, because there will be none left. So I feel that that's an aspiration that we all need to follow, is not to waste anything, but to nourish and cherish the things that are there for us. So I think we all as individuals need to think, what can we do? And it isn't just about our own, not eating meat on a Monday. It's about what can we do within our spheres of influence to really get this onto everybody's agenda. We need a movement to tackle this. We need everybody to work together, and I would urge everybody to think about how they can play their part.
And how did you make the jump, graduated from a degree in biology to running your first business?
Yeah, I went into business after university, as a lot of us did at that time. And then, it became apparent that there was some interesting challenges for business. And I was in Cambridge, and it was the time when they used to talk about what they called the Cambridge phenomenon. So it was all about how Cambridge University was spinning out these fantastic technology-based businesses. And we sort of thought that might be an interesting thing to get involved with. So a lot of our early work was about how you change business with technology.
So the Cambridge phenomenon now is like the next leg, basically, of the Cambridge phenomenon. I would say trying to, promote net zero and trying to get there. So maybe we could really draw good parallels with that.
Absolutely.
That was really interesting to hear about the ways that they're engaging with non-exec directors and the role that they can play in trying to make change happen around this agenda. It was brilliant.
Yes, and by the way, Chapter Series is also being replicated in 12 countries already. So hopefully we will see more of them all over the world.
In case you just joined us, this is Cambridge Zero Climate Talks with Antoinette and Amy. And if you have any questions or feedback, then email us at info@zero.cam.ac.uk.
Because we're celebrating World Environment Day today, I also spoke to two children, Jasper and Ryan, and this is what they had to tell us about how they see the world and planet Earth.
Jasper William Frederick Giles, age 7, and I am going to talk about environmental issues.
What would you like to tell me about the environment? Tell me.
Deforestation is causing our air to be polluted, and trees make oxygen for us humans to breathe, and they also stabilize the soil. And meat and dairy is bad for you, and livestock is making the environment go haywire, because we need more wild animals.
So why do you think we need more wild animals? What is their importance?
Their importance is to keep the community going, because if there's more wild animals, that means there's they can keep the life going and the ecosystem in shape for everything, the future generations and everything else.
And what do you think children should do to help the environment?
They should tell their mothers and fathers, or if they have older brothers that are over 18, to stop using cars and going on bicycles. Well, in the future, I'm hoping that we'll all go back to the wild and forage for food, not just go to the shop and buy food and have it. We need to cook our own food. And we can't. Why do we need to use gas?
Why do you think we should go foraging for food then?
Forage in the countryside, or go to Suffolk and forage in the countryside, or go to Costa Rica and live in the forest.
And to the children that are listening to this program and the grown-ups, what would you like to tell them about planet Earth? Would you like to give them any message?
Stop using plastic and keep wildlife going. So don't have as much red meat, dairy. Yeah.
I am 5 years old and my name's Ryan.
What would you like to tell me?
Weather's getting hotter, so it's getting gooder for people, but it's getting badder for Earth. You shouldn't go on a car for just nothing. We only go on a car for only if you have to, or you can just walk there if it's not too far.
Oh, and what do you think we shouldn't go in a car if we don't need to?
It'll hurt us and it'll make Earth dirty and it will smell soil.
That's good. I think you have great tips. So Ryan, thank you very much. Been so helpful.
Now not to dig Earth for even use.
Okay, no, we shouldn't dig Earth either. No, I agree. We shouldn't just dig Earth just because.
We build things from everything from Earth and it hurts a lot.
So we should really reuse and recycle all those materials, shouldn't we?
There are some things that I wish I can have, but my mom's not buying them.
What do you wish Mummy should buy you?
A Lego high-speed train.
A high-speed train?
A Lego one.
Oh, a Lego one, yeah. So
They're
that's
really expensive.
I know they are, aren't they? Yes. Do you think that perhaps you can build one yourself with cardboard boxes?
You can reuse them for one of our challenges.
And what's that challenge about?
Like making a house out of them for Little Red Riding Hood or Goldilocks.
Oh, that's a brilliant idea. I like that idea very much so.
It's always great to hear children's opinions and hear how they think about the world and how sometimes they see things more clearly than people when they grow up and have lots of different concerns. The next group that I went to go and talk to were a little bit older, but still coming from more of a youth perspective, which are the winners of this year's Carbon Challenge. So passing over to their interview. Today, I'm talking to Team FoodIE, who are the winners of this year's Carbon Challenge. I'm talking to Abby, Belinda, Mohammed and Nikki. First of all, could you tell me whereabouts in the world you're at the moment? Are you still in Cambridge?
My name's Abby. I'm a first year engineer at Magdalen, currently in London at the moment.
Hi, I'm Belinda and I'm currently in Hong Kong.
Hi, I'm Mohammed. I'm a fourth year medical student at Trinity Hall and I'm at Cambridge right now.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a second year chemical engineer and I'm currently in London as well.
Could you tell me what you are normally doing your day-to-day at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm currently a student, first year engineer, like I said. Obviously, things are a bit different because of the current situation, but most of day-to-day life just depends on working on this project, actually, which is really, really good. I get to work on my passions.
So I'm a second year geographer at Christ College, and so right now I'm sitting exams for my 4 papers this year. So just finished an exam and I'm currently just busy revising for my other ones coming up soon.
And as I said, I'm a fourth year medical student. So right now I'm in my clinical part of my education. So I'm just learning about clinical medicine and my exams have been delayed until October. So I'm just revising at this point.
I'm a second year student as well and I'm currently during exams as well. So I've just finished one and I've got another one tomorrow.
Brilliant. So lots of exams in new ways or at different times, or trying to work out how to study clinical medicine remotely, I imagine, which is all really challenging, but really interesting. We might touch more on that again later. This competition that you've been involved in was all about gamifying decarbonisation. Could you tell me a bit about how you got interested in climate and environment in the first place to want to enter this type of competition?
Well, I'd say my story is quite common to most people, in which I have an interest in reducing my carbon impact, but I just didn't know how to do it. And obviously, the more and more I spoke about it, I figured out that's how most people feel. You don't really understand what your carbon impact is going to be, how you can change these things. And so, especially because I knew quite a few people interested in it, I just thought it might be something worth exploring. How can we make this challenge a lot easier for people, especially students?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, my degree really helped a lot because kind of learning about all these environmental issues and the actual impact that it actually has on different scales within my subject actually made me a lot more aware of why it's so important that decarbonization happens, but also why is it so important for everyone, regardless of whether you are someone at a top level, government level, even down to a local person, like to really involve themselves in this kind of initiative.
Yeah, I agree with Abby. It's that you know about the problems that the world's going through and you don't really know how you can help, especially, and does your actions actually really change anything? So you get that kind of feeling. And so I was lucky enough to stumble upon Abby during a meeting and we just talked about sustainability and whatnot, and she invited me into the group.
Yeah, I feel like my answer is quite common to everyone as well, like not knowing what to do and how we can help and how we can make a change. So actually participating in this actually made me realize we can actually change our day-to-day lives and change our behavior and have a small contribution to climate change.
Brilliant. So actually for really all of you, it's actually taking the problem as read and actually trying to work out how you can make a change happen and how you can do that in your own lives and realise the power that you have to do that yourselves, but also spread that to other people as well and think about how you could help other people to make that transformation. This year's Carbon Challenge was focused on the theme of gamifying decarbonisation. So thinking about how approaches from the gaming industry or game theory could be used to encourage decarbonisation at any systemic scale. Could you tell me a bit about what your idea was? What was the Team FoodIE idea?
Our FoodIE idea is really focused on reducing the carbon footprints through the food industry. And we think that initially we really wanted to focus on how to actually get young people, particularly university students, who often, for example, have to cook themselves or find their own food, to really engage themselves in a fun and gamified way. So our idea essentially incorporates several different elements that involve challenge for young people to take part in, with very specific and contextual evidence for how they can actually change their behaviors, as well as the kind of more social element, which allows them to actually learn from their peers and neighbors around them, so that it's a more collective but also individualized and tailored approach towards decarbonization.
What I really loved about your idea actually was how you make it really relevant to people at the moment of whatever it is that they're doing. I also really like the idea of the FoodIE challenges that you put in, so actually creating specific things that would actually be quite fun to go and do and think, oh, could I do that? I don't know, could I do that? And I really, really like that, and how you made it very, very specific to the student experience in the first instance. So thinking about actually what are the concerns of your peers, and how do you make this fun and not make people feel like they're being lectured at, but actually help them to engage in making positive change.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were going for, really. So the whole idea of the carbon challenge, so basically it's the idea where you have like a challenge per day where you have to change some aspect of your life, and then you also post it on social media in order to like show that you've actually completed certain challenges. That really kind of was inspired by those 30-day challenges for fitness that you see going viral all the time, and we sort of applied that to the decarbonisation industry, something that is fun yet also like piques people's curiosity and hopefully makes them look more into the app and see what it's about further.
To add that, like, when we were thinking about initially the idea of decarbonisation for food, we wanted to think holistically from like different stages in which people interact with food. So coming from the perspective of what you actually buy to the very end when you actually are trying to compost your food. And so we really were, as students ourselves, really just drawing on our own experiences and thinking about what we would personally find, well, us and our peers as well, what we would find personally helpful to help us make better choices.
Digging into that a little bit more, and we talked a bit about why it's relevant to your peers, like how it can help, but could you talk a little about why that might make a difference to decarbonisation?
Yeah, so the decarbonisation impact, you can take it in sort of two different completely different routes. So you can go sort of the more data analysis side, which is the side that I was working on, but you also have the behavioural change side, which some of my other teammates have been working on as well. So in terms of decarbonisation, you have the physical impact. So when you choose not to have a meat option of food and choose for a vegan option, for example, that has a direct impact on how much carbon you're reducing, because you're actually basically the amount of carbon that you need to reduce to produce meat is a lot higher than, say, for example, if you use a meal with like a soy or a chickpea alternative or something like that. And if you have that slowly building up over time, you'll start to see a difference in your impact. So we calculated somewhere between 2% to 8% reduction in an average Brit's carbon impact, just from following some of the things that we've actually recommended through the app. But then the psychology aspect, I think Mohammed and Belinda have more to say on that than me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so my main interest was in the psychology side, and just how can we change people's habits in a slow and small way, but in a sustained way. Because many people, they get excited about something and they do it hardcore for a week and then they just stop. That doesn't really help things. So what we wanted to do is help people change their lives in the way that they want to. We don't want them to not enjoy their food. We don't want them to spend more money than they have to. And like, we're not pushing any agenda like veganism or whatnot. You can do what you want. We're just trying to offer more sustainable alternatives and just capitalizing on sustainable life changes on the long term, because that's where the most impact is.
Yeah, and I think I can add that with the idea of decarbonization, it's also not, as Abby said, like not just about the physical, tangible changes of like not getting a meat option, for example. It's also about the wider awareness that comes from the power that you are a consumer, and your choices actually really do affect the food industry and the emissions that are actually resulting from that on a really local scale. So that's kind of linking, I guess, what Mohammed said as well, with the idea of recognizing your own impact.
Yeah, I mean, like, I had this story from like the other day. So I was trying to tell my mum, okay, I don't want meat in my food anymore. So she was making curry, and she was putting basically lamb in the curry. And I said, okay, I don't want lamb in my curry. I want a special vegetarian option for myself. And she ended up making that for the entire house instead of just making it for myself. So it's like a really, really small difference, I guess, on a massive scale, but it is a massive difference in my family, because that's what we usually have. So it is those little changes that add up over time and reduce your decarbonisation impact.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. Okay, and a final question for you. What's the future of the app? What's going to happen next?
Well, I think in the long term, it would be really nice for us to actually trial and implement our app within the Cambridge context first and get some feedback for that. And like this summer, we already have plans to continue to prototype and further test that out and get more feedback and refine all our features, as well as do the research behind the different recommendations that we're hoping to have on the app. So really, we're looking forward to a proper launch at some point within the Cambridge context, and potentially in the far future, we can have something that's very properly refined and launched on a larger scale, maybe even across universities in the UK.
Brilliant. I think that sounds really exciting. Excellent. Thank you very, very much for all of your opinions. Are there any final things that any of you would like to say?
Thank you for having us on your show.
That's a total pleasure.
And also for creating this challenge as well for us to actually explore this idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's fantastic, Amy. I really like their app. And are they still looking for members?
Yes, they're actually still looking for a couple more members to join their team and help develop it further. So if you're interested, then email us at info@zero.cam.ac.uk. Okay, we'll make sure that email gets to the right people.
Brilliant. In case you just joined us, this is Cambridge Zero Climate Talks with Antoinette and Amy. I also had a very insightful chat with Munish Datta, and he works with CISL and also with the UK Green Building Council. And we had a very interesting conversation about the built environment, sustainability, and a few of the issues that not just of the issues that here in Cambridge we may face in relation to sustainability and inequality, but all over the world. So we had a really good chat.
Antoinette, thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you today. I feel very grateful. My name is Munish Datta, and I work primarily with the UK Green Building Council as Director of Membership and Operations, but I also work partly with the University of Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership as a Senior Associate and Tutor. And prior to that, I had a very long and fruitful career with Marks & Spencer, leading the development and delivery of its sustainability strategy that people may know as Plan A for its global property portfolio. So I guess if I was to summarize, and there are one or two other things I'll talk about later in the interview, which I do as well. But yeah, I suppose sustainability and sustainable business, sustainable operations is very much at the heart of my raison d'etre.
So is that what you do in your role as a Senior Associate Tutor and Faculty at CISL?
Yes, so University of Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, otherwise known as CISL, is one of my favorite things that I do in my life. I'm a, as you said, Senior Associate Tutor and Faculty there. And what that essentially means is I have the great privilege of working with senior business leaders and global organizations to tackle the critical global challenges we face and to see how we can apply the Sustainable Development Goals that CISL have presented in a framework called Rewiring the Economy to those kinds of organizations and their leadership teams to really empower them and make create strategies with them and then give them the confidence to deliver those strategies operationally in their organizations. So, I work with a number of different companies, from FMCG to property companies to banking and finance companies, both in programs specifically for one company, but also in programs, open programs, so both online and immersive in-person programs. Naturally, at this present time, our online work at CISL is very, very popular. So I'm actually tutoring on a course called Business Sustainability Management, and there are nearly 800 people from right across the world on this course, on an 8-week online course, which we kicked off 2 or 3 weeks ago. And me and my fellow tutors joined them on that journey. And I have to say, as much as they may learn from me, I'm very fortunate. I learned so much from working with these amazing, talented individuals and just sharing stuff with them and advocating the kind of change that we can bring about better outcomes from business in particular.
I understand as well that you're also involved for the UK Green Building Council. Is that right? Can you tell me a bit more about it?
Of course. So the majority of my working life actually is working with the UK Green Building Council. For those that don't know, UKGBC, the acronym for it, is a small and influential strategy where my responsibilities are about leading its membership strategy to maximize the value the council delivers for its over 440 business, government and academic members. So it's a membership organisation. It's a charity NGO membership organisation. And I have overall responsibility to make sure those members are happy and getting everything they want from UKGBC for the membership fees that they kindly donate to us. And also all the sort of operational finance and HR responsible functions within the organisation. And the UKGBC's mission, quite simply, is to radically improve the sustainability of the built environment, so buildings, construction, property, cities, places, by transforming the way it is planned, designed, built, constructed, maintained, operated, and reused at the end of its life. And so right across, if you imagine property having a life cycle, right across every part of that life cycle. And our membership has representation from every part of the property life cycle. So everything from investors to funders to designers to people that build, people that supply builders with products for buildings, people that maintain and occupy buildings, and then people that repurpose building at the end of their lives. And we do that, we try and achieve that mission by focusing on a number of things that enables the built environment and the planet to coexist and thrive together. So mitigating and adapting to climate change, eliminating waste and maximizing resource efficiency, embracing and restoring nature and promoting biodiversity, optimizing the health and well-being of people, very important, especially in the current time, and really, really significantly creating long-term value for society and improving quality of life. These are sort of the 4 or 5 key areas of impact that we try and create at the UKGBC.
And you mentioned, the current pandemic. So how do you see the built environment emerging out of COVID-19?
That's a really good question, and probably one of the big questions that I suppose not just this sector, but every sector is currently asking, isn't it? So let's just talk about the built environment. I think the first thing, of course, is the health and well-being impacts and addressing those. That's the immediate and urgent priority for governments, local authorities, cities, and of course all businesses that are operating in the sector. And we have to humbly recognise that the economic impact is unknown, but undoubtedly will be severe. But we believe that the action to tackle the other big emergencies that are in our society, the climate and ecological emergencies, can, as we recover from this shock of COVID-19 and we create the sort of stimulation from an economic point of view, that actually dealing with both the economic emergency, but the climate and ecological emergency can happen at the same time to create better long-term resilience in communities and societies. So, whilst COVID-19 is having an undoubtedly profound impact, it hasn't really changed the fundamentals of the gravity of importance of the climate and ecological crisis. So that when we transition out of this shock that we're in now, and we continue to journey towards net zero carbon, we need to absolutely make sure that nature can directly support the economic delivery, and we need to make sure that a nature-based ecological recovery, climate recovery is very much a sort of alongside the economic recovery. And I think what we're seeing is through the response from both business and the public sector through this crisis that we're in now, we're seeing an ever greater responsibility and response to protect, support, and create what I suppose everyone is defining and finding as this sort of holistic value for all their stakeholders throughout their value chain. Purpose is another way, I suppose, to describe that. And given its footprint and impact on our lives almost everywhere, the built environment, I think, is a key sector to harness the opportunity of a green recovery and literally build back better, And we're seeing some real proof points of this sort of twinned benefit of economic, environmental, and nature resilience. And I was reading only yesterday that businesses with strong profiles on material sustainability issues have the potential to outperform those with poor profiles at this time in particular. And the world's largest investor, BlackRock, have just released a report that suggests, and I quote, 88% of sustainable indices did better than their non-sustainable counterparts in the first 4 months of 2020. So really strong proof points about if we can put green recovery at the heart of the recovery out of COVID, it can be very successful in so many different ways.
So basically, the purpose of buildings changed, and how it's affecting the industry and the sustainability impact, given the report of yesterday as well, what you read on the news, is actually becoming much better. What's your view on that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, Angela. I think the purpose of buildings and how they may change is interesting, because you and I are having this conversation at work, but of course we're not in a typical office. We are in our homes. So beyond the initial shock, almost every building typology is going to be reevaluated in terms of its core function, or whether or not its design is fit for purpose. So the way we work, like you and I are now, the way we shop, the way we learn, like schools, the way we seek enjoyment from leisure activities, and our overall consumption of buildings, places, and cities undoubtedly will change. So I think the whole purpose of buildings, cities, places is one of the big, and urbanization more generally is one of the big questions that's coming out of this crisis.
And you mentioned big cities and density. And I also understand that you work with the Rama Foundation with vulnerable communities in India. How has COVID-19 affected them, and have you been doing anything to support them?
Thank you. Yeah, that's it's really important to understand that this crisis is not affecting anyone in any place equally. This is very context dependent. So let me just first of all explain what Rama Foundation is. Rama Foundation is a small Cambridge-based charity trying to make differences in the lives of disadvantaged people and vulnerable communities in India, and it mainly works in the areas of education and health, and it partners with organizations like Cambridge University Hospitals and Cambridge Global Health Partnerships to take professional volunteers, primarily and most recently in the sort of health sector, to India to work with NGOs and charities who work with these disadvantaged communities, to upskill them, to enable them to share the best practice, and indeed take best practice from them to be able to better serve those vulnerable communities in India. So in April this year, we were actually due to take a big team of volunteers out to India, but sadly we couldn't do that, and have then pivoted our work actually for the immediate need, which is actually very basically just food relief and mobilizing. And now we're starting to look at how can we work virtually. And the reason for that is, in places like India, applying lockdown to 1.4 billion people, which India has largely been in for the last 2 or 3 months, and putting social distancing measures in dense, low-income, urban neighborhoods in these kinds of places is of course trying to mitigate the medical crisis that COVID is presenting, but it's resulting in a hunger crisis. It's resulting in a huge humanitarian crisis. Daily wage earners, which is the large part of these kinds of communities, have lost all their income and access to food. And so it's a massive issue. And of course, in some parts of India at the moment with the typhoon, there's a compounding tragedy of extreme weather, as well as this issue of the humanitarian crisis. How do you compulsorily shelter evacuated people into schools and buildings, and also apply social distancing? And where is their priority? Is their priority not to get a virus, or is their priority just to stay alive by eating? So I'm delighted that we are able to do a little bit as a charity, working with our incredible partners out in India to provide some relief work in the form of food parcels to the most vulnerable and most affected people in regions of India.
Yes, that's something that is not in our immediate we don't really perceive immediately, unless you have relatives or people in other countries to really see how it's affecting them. So you have a big issue of inequality as well. And the environment is also suffering a lot. It's not just people, but the environment and all the progress they've made. You just don't know what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think in every society, what this crisis is exposing is the fragility of inequality. And actually, in many cases, it's widening that. So yes, India's enjoyed 67% of GDP growth for a number of years now, which is great. But who has really enjoyed that GDP growth? What this crisis is showing there's not been an equal distribution of that economic benefit. It's been actually quite unequal, and actually it's widened inequalities. And the same in the UK. We mustn't forget, Antoinette, you and I work in one of the most unequal cities in the UK as well. So there, it's not just in places like India, but this is widening and showing the glaring inequalities in society in almost every part of the world.
So when we mention sustainability, do you think that within sustainability, there is that sustainability is not equal, that there are a lot of inequalities nationally, locally, and globally? When we talk about not having a sustainable future, what does it mean for everybody?
Yeah, I think this last 3 months of our lives have actually brought that point home more than ever before. So we all talk about the journey to net zero carbon. Cambridge Zero is, of course, that is at the very heart of the university's efforts to get to that, and also influence the world to get to that. But what we must make sure that in transitioning to net zero, we're not just focusing in our own bubble that we live in. We make net zero accessible to every part of society. We make the journey to this not exclusive. We make it inclusive. That is so critical, and never more has it been apparent than what we're seeing in the last 3 months, with really basic things like medical aid, access to medical facilities, access to social distancing, and as I've given with the example in India, just simple access to food. So for those Indians who are currently just looking for their next daily food ration, where does net zero figure in their thinking, do you think, at the moment? So we mustn't forget them. We mustn't forget the people in the UK that are relying on food banks, et cetera, as well. We must make sure that this is, as many have said, a very just transition to net zero, not just the privilege of people that can afford to be net zero.
And how much of a role does education play
in understanding sustainability and in ensuring that everybody can see, not with the same eyes, but having a similar understanding of the inequalities in society?
Working with CISL, which is obviously based in the University of Cambridge, and also a very large part of the work we do at the UK Green Building Council is about education of business. It's about empowering business with knowledge and case studies and skills to be able to go into their operating environment to bring about the much needed change that's required. At the other end of the spectrum, in my role as a governor at the Stephen Peirce Foundation, which is a foundation of schools in Cambridge, and the reason I have a slight conflict of interest here is that my son is a student in Year 6. So to be a governor, which I've been since November last year, is a great opportunity to shape his education and of all the children at the school. And aside from putting it at the heart, putting sustainability at the heart of curriculum, in not just this school, but every school in every part of the world, and in an equal way everywhere. It's also about how can schools operate and create sort of the environments that they need in a more sustainable way. How can we have net zero carbon schools? How can we have biodiversity rich schools? How can children have access to nature? And very critically for Stephen Peirce Foundation, being a group of independent schools, what social value beyond its core function does the foundation and the school generate within its wider community, both in Cambridge and because of its, Cambridge being such a global city, more globally as well. Because it's absolutely right. It's not lost on me on the fact that as an independent school, my son's in a very privileged position, and that, as I said earlier, is quite a big burden on me personally, because I feel that I need to use that privilege to be able to benefit much more widely than my own self. I need to become a facilitator to enable better educational outcomes, not just in my son's school, but in other schools in Cambridge, and then taking that best practice and spreading that globally if possible.
So great. That was a really, really interesting interview. And it was great to hear more about the issues of inequality and climate change. It's something that we've not really touched upon so far in this programme, and it's something that's really, really important to be a part of this conversation.
Yes, and I feel that having this show, this radio program, really helps to make us more informed, because the more informed we are, the better decisions we can make. And I think having a very broad view of what's happening, not just in relation to environment, not just in relation to climate change or sustainability, but overview of what's going on around the world if we want to make this transition to a green economy more sustainable and equal for everybody, not just for a few people.
Yes, absolutely. And then finally, you also went to go and talk to Naomi and Claire this week. So what are they doing?
Yes, I had a wonderful chat with them, and they both work for the public engagement team of the university. And I started by asking Claire what the public engagement team does and what their Curious People project is all about.
We create festivals for the public, and one of the projects that we're doing for one of our festivals is called Curious People. So I'm working on that project at the moment.
You, Naomi?
I'm the public engagement and festival manager, (sciences). So I was in charge of managing the Cambridge Science Festival, which was canceled midway through because of COVID in March. And I'm working with Claire on the Curious People project.
So can you tell me what the Curious People project is about?
Yeah, so it sort of grew out of partly the cancellation of the Science Festival, but also we were curious about what people outside the university are curious about. So we wanted to know what questions the public have about our research, or what questions the public have generally that might be related to some research at the university.
And are there many questions related to the environment or climate change or sustainability, or you just getting like a very broad spectrum of questions?
We have gotten a huge range of questions so far, but there are some related to the environment. Do you want to share some of the questions that we've gotten? And then we also have a couple of snippets of answers that we've collected already that we can share.
We've got one of the first questions we got was what's the one thing I should do to reduce climate change? And that's one we've got an answer for already, so I can share a bit of that. We got Professor Eric Wolf. He's a Royal Society Research Professor and Department of Earth Sciences, and he has answered that question for us. So we've got a couple of clips. He's dealt with it in terms of what an individual could do and what, as a society, we could do. So first of all, he's answered what he as an individual, one thing he as an individual could do.
And do actually the people, do they record the questions, or do they send them via email?
So people submit their questions through a form online. So originally we were hoping to get recordings of people asking the questions as well, but we haven't been able to do that yet. So people type into a form and submit their question, and they can do it anonymously, or they can leave their name and email address. We'll let them know once we have an answer to their question.
And what type of questions have people been asking?
So in addition to the one about what's the one thing I can do to reduce climate change, we got a lot of questions related to animals, and also some questions about sort of food. So we have another one about how much good does Meatless Monday really do for the environment, and also the animal related ones are very interesting. For example, a child at 7-year-old at one of the events that we had in person asked, why don't snakes get poisoned by their own venom? So there's a huge range of questions there. And we also had something about should we all be eating insects? These are questions that we're going to also try to collect answers to.
So I thought, is that question the most sort of like extreme question, or have you received any very extreme question that you think like, I never thought about that, it's very extreme, but it's a very good question?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've received some ones that that I thought I never would have thought of that. That's really interesting, and I want to know the answer to that. And then some that I think I didn't know I wanted to know that, but now I do.
And so do you have sort of a period where you're collecting the questions? I mean, people listening to the program today, will they say, oh, well, I have a few questions, I would love to get in touch and ask you a few questions. Do you have a deadline for them?
We don't have a deadline currently. It's kind of an ongoing project. So we haven't started releasing any of the videos yet, but we're hoping to start putting our answers out there in July. But if anyone wants to get in touch and ask a question, they can go to the Science Festival website, which is sciencefestival.cam.ac.uk, and then they can click on the orange icon which says "Calling All Curious People" underneath. Or if that website address was too long, just Google search for Cambridge Science Festival and make sure that you get the UK one instead of the US one.
And you, Claire, how did you get involved into the whole sort of science? Is it just Science Festival that you focus on, or is it all about sort of external affairs?
It's all of the festivals and the kind of public events that we hold. The public engagement team put on, get involved in whatever I can. I'm sort of doing marketing for it. So I'm managing social media accounts, and I'm very interested in digital and video. So this was a wonderful project to get my teeth into.
And what about you, Naomi?
So I used to work at the Gurdon Institute, which is a small biology and cancer research institute that's also part of the University of Cambridge. And I was coordinating their public engagement activities. So I just started on the team, the Science Festival team, in mid-February, so just before all of this craziness happened. And so in addition to doing this project and helping with the Science Festival that happened this year, I'm also starting to plan ahead for next year. I'm involved in some of the Open Cambridge stuff that we're planning for the autumn, and a couple of other projects here and there.
And because of the festival being people sort of face to face, people driven, how are you managing that now? The events, are they more open to online activities? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think Claire's been doing a lot of great work on our social media channels. Claire's been putting out, we've had a lot of content to share that's related to the Science Festival and also other festivals and activities we're associated with. There's been an explosion of online activity, which you've all probably seen across the internet, people offering lots and lots of various online things for people to virtually attend. And people do seem to be quite receptive and hungry to it. We're also working with the UK Science Festival Network. There's a digital working group that we're part of to try and understand how we can improve and grow, because digital engagement wasn't something that we were particularly strong in prior to the pandemic. So it's definitely something that we're working on and thinking about a lot for next year's festival.
Wonderful. And would you like to leave any message about World Environment Day to our listeners?
I suppose right now, looking at the changes we've made during lockdown, maybe seeing any of the good things that you've changed in your life, to maybe try and continue those if you can.
That was really interesting. And if people want to find out more about the Curious People Project, how do they get in touch?
Yes, well, they can Google Cambridge Science Festival, and they will come to the website, and they will take them to all the different links and social media accounts if they want to have more information or join them or just follow what their activities, what they are. Amy, today went by very quickly, very insightful, and that's the World Environment Day. Not finished, but we still have a few hours to keep doing a few more things. So, do you have any plans for the weekend?
I have any plans to well, it's my birthday on Monday, so I think...
Happy birthday in advance, Amy. Have a wonderful weekend. And this is all for this week. Please tune in next Friday. We'll be having more insightful conversations about climate change, environment, and sustainability